Hello, everybody. Welcome to your favorite NFL talk show, Students of the Game. I'm here, Justin Dade, here, joined with Elijah Freeman, and we're going to do a little something different this week because we have the NFL Draft coming up. We are now under 24 hours away, one of my favorite parts of the offseason of the NFL, and we're going to do something interesting today. What are we doing today, Elijah?
Well, good day, everyone. I, Elijah, am going to ask you, Justin, some questions that I have, burning questions, dare I say, about the upcoming NFL draft here in 2016. Questions about who's going to go where, what teams are thinking, and, of course, how many different players we're going to have at various different positions, all those sort of questions. So I'm going to start right at the top of the NFL draft. My guess is the Rams, who have traded up to the number one pick, all the way from the 15th pick, are going to take Jared Goff. And my guess is also that the Eagles, who traded up from the 8th pick all the way up to the 2nd pick with Cleveland, are going to take Carson Wentz. My question to you is, what would you do if you were those teams, if you were sitting at number one on the clock, and do you think the decisions that I have suggested, Goff 1, Wentz 2, is actually the right call?
Yeah, everything we've heard these last few weeks, ever since Los Angeles traded up for that number one overall pick.
You almost said St. Louis.
I almost did.
Been the St. Louis Rams for 3 months.
But I didn't. I held myself back there, don't worry. And then Philadelphia traded up as well. But as soon as we saw the Rams trade up, everybody started to tweet and wonder and guess what quarterback they were after. We're pretty sure. I've seen people tweet, analysts tweet, like 99% sure they're going to take Jared Goff. And I like that. When I compare these two quarterbacks, I think of Jared Goff as being the more pro-ready starter day one, and Carson Wentz more of a developmental type of quarterback. But I think that Carson Wentz has a higher ceiling, in my opinion, from what I've seen physically and from what I've seen what he can do on the field. Obviously, North Dakota State isn't the ideal program to develop a quarterback, but Carson Wentz did a great job with what he had there.
I think I can agree with all of those sort of sentiments. I think that's kind of the perception amongst many NFL analysts as well. Goff could be taken with the Rams because they are trying to get the excitement up as they move to Los Angeles, get a quarterback that they can actually work with because there really isn't a lot there right now. And Wentz, maybe if Sam Bradford stays there, who knows? I mean, Bradford says he's not exactly happy with the rumors that they're going to take a quarterback, and they are. But if indeed Sam Bradford is still in Philadelphia come the beginning of next season, he can start and Wentz can marinate on the bench for a little bit. So I guess to recap, the answer for the question as far as you're concerned is that yes, those teams are going to be getting the players that they should be getting.
Yeah, I think really the first pick of the NFL draft comes at 3 with San Diego. I think the first two picks are pretty much locked, and I don't think that those top two players are the top overall players on anybody's board, really, other than those two teams. So technically, I mean, San Diego's sitting in really good here at 3 with technically the number one overall pick in the draft.
Absolutely. So I don't mean to go pick by pick the entire first round, but I will ask you, so if indeed San Diego has almost the pick of the litter, they weren't going to take a quarterback anyways. Phillip Rivers still has a couple good years left. And I think they're going to waste his good years without some sort of offensive line. So do you think they try to take an offensive lineman with that 3rd overall, but in a certain way almost 1st overall pick of guys that they're actually considering since they weren't going to take a quarterback? What are they going to do at number 3?
Yeah, so everything we've seen in the top 10, we've seen a lot of rumors for just about every team, and the one team that we aren't hearing a lot about right now is San Diego. I mean, they've done a really good job at hiding exactly what they want because we've got 4 players in play here, in my opinion. We have 4 players in play with Laramie Tunsil is one of them at offensive tackle. Ronnie Stanley has also been linked to San Diego, being taken over Laramie Tunsil. That's also a thing. Matt Miller reported that on Bleacher Report the other day, and then it was talked about on ESPN I saw the other day as well. And Jalen Ramsey's in play. They need a free safety. They really need one with Eric Weddle leaving for Baltimore. Gone. And DeForest Buckner is also in play for help at the defensive line. And it wouldn't surprise me if they went with either of those 4 players. And that's just the thing. Nobody really knows what San Diego is doing except San Diego. But the way I break it down is, for me, I think Jalen Ramsey is the right choice because he's the number 1 player on my board. After watching film and seeing all that he can do, I think Ramsey's got it all. And he really does have it all. He can tackle, a fantastic coverage man, very good in press, extremely good ball skills. And I just think Ramsey is a good fit here. And when you think about their offensive line,
It's a disaster, though.
But we already have King Dunlap in left and Joseph Barksdale at right. Coach McCoy came out the other day talking about how they really like Barksdale at right and didn't say anything about King Dunlap at left, which was interesting. But
I think that position could and should be upgraded. I would take an offensive lineman if I was the Chargers. Phillip Rivers is just going to get annihilated and continue to get annihilated if they don't pick up some kind of offensive line protection. Although that could be addressed later, but they need some help. Otherwise, he's just going to keep getting sacked all the time.
Yeah, it's completely possible, and I think offensive line is one of those places where San Diego needs to improve. And like we talked about, that Stanley and Tunsil are two great players who are definitely worthy of this selection too. But just for something just tells me Ramsey's the pick here. But I could be wrong, and I wouldn't be surprised if Tunsil or Stanley goes here.
Alrighty, so again, not to just necessarily go pick by pick. I'm not trying to just give an analysis of every last team in the draft as we move down. There'd be 32 teams and a little bit a piece on each one of them. But I think if we move on down to the Dallas Cowboys for a second here, the Dallas Cowboys are picking 4th overall, and this is the highest they've picked in quite some time because they kind of had a bottom-out season last year. So do the Dallas Cowboys, I have heard so many different things. They could take a defensive player like Ramsey if he's still available. I've heard this is the beginning of the Ezekiel Elliott from Ohio State at running back kind of suggestions. What are the Cowboys going to be up to? I don't think a quarterback. I think it'd be ridiculous to take a quarterback at 4. That was, I think, maybe quarterback rumors before the trade-ups to 1 and 2. But what the heck are the Cowboys going to do is my next question.
Yeah, quarterbacks definitely out of play for Dallas here at 4 with the top 2 quarterbacks off the board. And personally, for my taste, this is too early for a guy like Ezekiel Elliott. You know, we talk about how Dallas is a fantastic offensive line, obviously, and they're going to need a running back this offseason to fill the gap that DeMarco Murray left, leaving 2 seasons ago now. And, again, if Jalen Ramsey's on the board, I'm sorry, he's my guy.
Yeah, I would have to
He's
agree.
my guy for Dallas because Dallas needs help in the secondary defensive line, you know, running back too. But so we bringing guys like Joey Bosa in play here. But if Jalen Ramsey's on the board, I don't see how Dallas passes, in my opinion.
No, I tend to agree with you there. I think that's probably what they would do indeed. So there's a couple other teams that I guess we could discuss. Here's a question for you. What do we think San Francisco is going to do? I'm skipping a couple teams there, but San Francisco is the next one that really intrigues me because I don't really think that team and its new management and Chip Kelly believes in Colin Kaepernick. They might deal him during the draft. There's a chance that happens. Is it possible they take a quarterback? Is there any way that you think that they would? This is probably the beginning of the Paxton Lynch idea, which I think, again, is probably way too early. But then again, quarterbacks always get overvalued. We've seen it pretty much already with teams trading up to 1 and 2 to take players that I don't think are anywhere near anyone's 1 and 2 in the big board. So, is there a chance that San Francisco goes QB, or what else do they do?
Yeah, this is a similar situation with Dallas. The quarterback is not in play here for San Francisco, in my opinion. When we talk about, again, reaching for a guy like Paxton Lynch here, it's way too early. It's way too early. It's way too risky. And there's just something about it. I think Chip Kelly potentially may roll with Colin Kaepernick or Blaine Gabbert again. Well, not again since he's new, but I wouldn't surprise me if they decide to roll with one of those two or draft another quarterback later down the line. I really think that San Francisco goes best defensive player available right here. Or if a guy like Ronnie Stanley is there at 7 still, or Laramie Tunsil for some reason, I think that's another option they could go. We found out today that the right tackle, his name's escaping me at this moment.
Anthony Davis?
Yeah, Anthony Davis, yes. Said that he probably won't return to San Francisco. So, I mean, Joel Staley's not getting any younger over there at left either. So I think left tackle and right tackle kind of both needs for San Francisco as well. But I've been mocking DeForest Buckner here.
That's a lot of what I've heard as well.
I don't think Buckner makes it out of the top 7 because of San Francisco here, sitting here. They really like him from what I've heard. And, you know, he'd fit pretty well with Eric Armstead on the other side, you know, the two Oregon guys working together. I really like DeForest Buckner. A lot of people don't like him. If they don't look into it, they think of how poor Eric Armstead was his first year. They just don't think that an Oregon defensive lineman is going to have much of any success. But DeForest Buckner had a really good year last year. Really impressed me with how he played against the run in addition to getting to the quarterback. And, you know, obviously his problem is getting leverage at his tall height, 6'7". So But yeah, I think Buckner is definitely in play here for San Francisco, and that would be who I think is the selection here.
I think it's not only the Eric Armstead somewhat lackluster rookie. I think it's Deion Jordan as well, and that's just another in the last couple of years of one of those big, giant Oregon defensive linemen that didn't really have the obvious position or didn't really have the obvious fit. Just freak athlete, but doesn't necessarily, I don't know, just pan out. It's kind of become a thing where those Oregon defenders have not necessarily translated on the defensive line.
But I'll tell you, first and foremost, Buckner's a different player. He really is. In my opinion, he's different than the other Oregon defensive linemen we've seen come out.
I could definitely believe it. A guy that I think people have suggested is falling down the draft boards, Miles Jack's got to get picked somewhere, right? Unless people are really convinced that the medical red flags are really, really serious. But come on, Miles Jack is awesome. He's got to get picked in like the top 10 or something, right?
Over these last few days, it's been really confusing for me to monitor. Obviously, we don't have any insiders from team contacts telling us what they're thinking. But this one's really been frustrating for me because we've been hearing the reports go back and forth and back and forth. What we hear from Miles is different than what we hear from some teams. We heard today that the Giants took Jack off their board pretty much completely. Teams in the teens, I've also heard, are worried about his knee. The thing is, I think, from what I've heard anyway, that Jacksonville is extremely comfortable with Miles Jack. And if Miles Jack is their best player on their board at 5, then Miles Jack's going to go to Jacksonville at 5. And I think Jack's a good fit at 5. I would be really surprised if Jack makes it out of the top 10. I really would.
Miles Jacksonville is what you're saying?
It wouldn't surprise me. I like it a lot. I think they need an inside linebacker, and I think he'd fit there perfectly. He said that he might need microfracture surgery sometime down the road. But he believes he's close to being 100% or close to 100%. So we really don't know. This is a really tough one. We're gonna have to wait to see tomorrow night to see what happens. But I do think he goes in the top 10.
Alrighty, next question for you. I just mentioned Ezekiel Elliott kind of briefly earlier. I don't necessarily think the Cowboys are going to take him. But also my question to you, got to be a top 10, right? Because I think there's a number of teams, the Giants, the Bears, the Dolphins at 13. Maybe even the Browns at 8 if they even stay there, because I think they would trade down again if somebody wanted to go jump up and get maybe an Ezekiel Elliott. But where's the best running back in the draft, in my personal opinion, headed, if you had to say?
Yeah, so I've been mocking the exact same thing you were just talking about, is Cleveland trading back, and I think Miami is the team that wants to aggressively move up for a guy like Ezekiel Elliott.
Although they've been spinning Jay Ajayi as like, oh man, he's really good.
Right. I don't think that Miami can go next season into having Jay Ajayi as their workhorse back. I just don't think that they can do that at this time. I believe Ajayi can be a solid contributor, but I don't think he's warranted of the bell cow just yet. I think Ezekiel Elliott would be a really smart move to trade up because I don't think he'll be there at 13 if they're going to wait. And I think the Browns will be a team willing to look back. And when you sit at 13, all of a sudden you're looking at Paxton Lynch territory for Cleveland, while picking up another pick or two in this trade. Cleveland's done really well picking up extra picks and trading back over the last few years. So,
well, what has that gotten them? They just haven't hit on.
They haven't hit on a whole lot, unfortunately.
That's for sure. But okay,
a lock for Ezekiel Elliott in the top 15 for sure.
I would have to agree. I don't think there's any way. I think Miami's going to try to make a move, and if they don't, you may not get down to them because apparently the Bears are in love with him, which kind of makes sense in the absence of Matt Forte.
Yeah, I don't know. I really like Jeremy Langford though too. So what I've been hearing and what I think the Bears will go defensive line. I think Shaq Lawson and Leonard Floyd are the two guys they're looking at.
I could easily see either one of those. The Bears could use some help on defense, which is kind of sort of weird to say. Okay, so if you want to, you brought up Paxton Lynch, so I was going to ask about him at some point. Paxton Lynch could go anywhere in the first round, but I do believe he'll go in the first round. Are we agreed on that point?
I think there's not much of a chance he's going to make it out of the first round.
There's a team somewhere that's going to fall in love with him, perhaps overdraft him. I don't know. I have a good feeling that Paxton Lynch could definitely develop, but he's pretty raw, I would say, at this point. But he's obviously got the tools, and he's absolutely huge. 6'7"?
He's definitely an NFL prototypical quarterback in terms of build, for sure. Got it all.
Even taller than your average quarterback. Okay, so if you want to talk about Paxton Lynch, I have heard, I don't know, like the 49ers was probably the first and highest one or something like that. I don't think it's going to happen, but possible. Maybe the Browns, whether they stay at say put at 8 or trade back or something like that. I've even heard that the New Orleans Saints could possibly draft a quarterback in anticipation of life after Drew Brees, although it seems kind of strange to me. The Bills, I've heard suggested, although I don't know why. Tyrod Taylor seems good enough to me, but even the Jets, I mean, I have no idea, all the way back to perhaps the very end of the round, in suggesting maybe the Broncos want to pick up a quarterback.
Yeah, that's the floor for me with Lynch is 31. That's the floor. I don't think he gets there, but if he does, he won't be around for the second
well, if you
round.
don't think he gets there, where does he get? How far does he go, or how high up does he get?
Like I said, that I mocked, that the Cleveland trading back to 13, and I think he could go as early as that 13 pick if Cleveland decides to trade back. If Cleveland stays put at 8, I don't think Lynch goes there. And that really hurts him because it might take a while before he gets there. And a team like the Jets or the team, maybe even the Broncos, consider trading up in the late teens. A team like Atlanta looking to trade back potentially, that's an option. So it's really going to be tough to say. But I'd be really surprised if Lynch goes top 10. I think his range is somewhere, really anywhere from 13 to 25. And it's just going to be hard to pick a team in there because, like I said, somebody might trade up for this guy.
Although I don't know if he gets past a certain point, I don't know if the Broncos would feel even a need to go unless they think someone might leapfrog them or something. Because those playoff teams obviously don't need a quarterback.
Right.
And it's probably they got there for a reason.
Well, the reason you would do that is to prevent somebody else trading up instead of them, if that makes sense. Because remember, the Browns have pick 32 as well, so they could be interested in trading up again
just
from that spot.
From that spot even.
Yes.
So the Browns could be a very, very interesting team. The only thing with the Browns is, can they actually hit on some of these players? Or
right.
I think even in a lot of cases they draft good players, but the players just kind of implode because it's Cleveland or something.
You talk about other quarterbacks who have potential first-round selections too. We talk about Connor Cook, who's been linked to the Broncos a little bit. And even I heard
only if Lynch was off the board, I'm guessing.
Right, and I've heard even the Bills really like Christian Hackenberg, which is really interesting. If the Bills pulled the trigger in the teens on Christian Hackenberg, I might lose it. I would. We won't talk about. We won't.
I mean, I don't know why they don't like Tyrod Taylor. He was great when he was healthy.
Again, that could be completely wrong. Obviously, that's a rumor that's been going around. I don't think Christian Hackenberg is a round 1 quarterback, but again, it's the NFL draft. I wouldn't be surprised to see it.
Alrighty, so I got a question for you here. I think we kind of established that some quarterbacks will be going early, that there will be a running back pick fairly early with Ezekiel Elliott. Always high picks for those tackles or whatever, and some defensive players. But what about a wide receiver? Number 1, who do you think the first wideout taken is? Or even perhaps should be, if those are 2 separate questions for you. 2 separate answers, I should say. And also, who's going to take him?
Yeah,
if you had to guess.
We want to talk about the top receiver on my board is still Laquan Treadwell, despite his dropping that he's been doing recently. There's questions about his speed concerns. I'm not all that concerned about it. I think he's a dominant red zone wide receiver. I compared him to Allen Robinson since I started looking at him. That's the guy I've linked him to a little bit. But I also wouldn't be surprised if he isn't the first one to go, because when we start thinking about the wide receiver run, that's going to start at 22, 23, and 24 with Houston, Minnesota, and Cincinnati. All 3 teams really need a wide receiver. Will Fuller has been linked to the Texans, and I think that's a good fit there. So if no wide receivers go in the top 20, all of a sudden Will Fuller goes off the board first at 22. Then the Vikings can take a guy like Treadwell or Coleman, and then the Bengals are left with the other of the 2 or Josh Doxson. So I think that's where wide receivers are really going to fly off the board. I'd be surprised if Treadwell goes top 15, even top 20. At this point, we've seen his stock drop that much.
Which I think is silly. I think he's obviously the best overall wide receiver in the draft, in my personal opinion. But there are 4 wide receivers there. I wonder if you've listed a run of 3 teams, and I totally agree with you. With the way Cincinnati's wideout core has been pillaged in the offseason with the departures of Sanu to your Bengals, correct?
To my Falcons, yes.
The Falcons. What am I saying?
That's okay.
Sanu to the Falcons, and also losing
Marvin Jones to Detroit.
To the Lions.
Yep.
So they could use one. Houston could use somebody opposite DeAndre Hopkins, and the Vikings could use some targets for Teddy. So maybe one of those wide receivers won't be in the first round if there's another team that doesn't decide they want one.
Overall, it's a pretty weak wide receiver class this year compared to the last couple years we've had when we've seen guys like Odell Beckham come off the board.
2014 class is insane for wide receivers.
Sammy Watkins
and Landry and Beckham and on the list.
So compared to that, this wide receiver class is definitely not up to that level.
What do you think your Falcons will do? Do you have a suggestion for?
Yeah, so I've been really focused on the general draft, so I haven't had a whole lot of time to focus on Atlanta as much as I usually do. Normally I do Falcons mock drafts where I go through every pick they've got and mock a guy there. But I decided not to do it this year just because I've been focused on the draft in general. And it'll just be nice to go in without some expectations. And I think the Falcons will take the best defensive player available left at 17, whoever that is. It might be defensive line, might be linebacker, might be defensive end. Could even be safety and not really at 17. But if they trade back, I could see safety being in play. We really love Keanu Neal. I know that's linked. We really like Keanu Neal with the connection from Dan Quinn to Florida. Okay. But if we stay put and Darren Lee's on the board, he's my choice. Shaq Lawson is a guy I'd really love to see too, but he's not going to make it to 17. Darren Lee, I would really like to see. Reggie Ragland, maybe if Dan Quinn likes Reggie Ragland, I'm fine.
Do not take Reggie Ragland off the board. The Packers need Reggie Ragland.
Has a very slim chance of making it to 27, I hate to tell you.
Why do you have to ruin my dreams, Justin? I would be over the moon if the Packers
and that's Reggie the exact Ragland. Guy that they would take if they got him, if he got there, but I just don't think he will.
Okay, well, so your favorite team is going to take Darren Lee.
I think Darren Lee's a great pick.
That. I would agree with that. Ohio State linebacker. But, okay, so if you insist on ruining the dream that Ragland won't be there, what are the Packers going to do at 27?
Yeah, another interesting situation, another team that really needs similar needs to the Falcons, really, as a whole. We need linebackers and defensive linemen.
Yep.
And the number one need for Green Bay is and has been for years now at inside linebacker, and they haven't found anybody to really take over that role, and it's been kind of disappointing. I'm surprised they haven't really addressed it very much. Personally, I think it's time that Clay Matthews leaves that area and moves back to outside linebacker.
Yeah, I suppose.
Obviously, he played somewhat decent at inside linebacker. That's not where he needs to be. He needs to be back on the outside with Peppers on the other side.
Absolutely.
But if Ragland is indeed off the board, there's not going to be an inside linebacker worth taking at 27, unless you're thinking of reaching for a guy like Kentrell Brothers or something like that, but that'd be more of a second-round selection. So I think the Packers end up taking the best defensive lineman available really at 27. There's a lot of good ones that are going to be in this place. Kemdiche could still be there, but I don't think the Packers would select him. But I'm going to say Jaron Reed, Ashawn Robinson might be there, Vernon Butler, Andrew Billings. Vernon Butler, I said. But I think Jaron Reed is a guy the Packers really need to look at because he really impresses me. Not only can Reed play 3-4 nose tackle, he can play 3-4 defensive end, but I think Reed would be a fantastic fit at defensive tackle. Amazing against the run. Absolutely wonderful against the run. And we talked about how talented that Alabama defense was last season. He was I think, at 56 tackles on the season. That's really impressive for a defensive tackle.
So we want an Alabama defensive player is what we want.
I think either that's Ragland a good plan. That's a really good plan.
It usually is from a national champion team.
But if you end up with a guy like Andrew Billings or Vernon Butler who can both play nose tackle, then you're still fine. I think the Packers should take the best defensive lineman available at 27 or trade back. We know Ted Thompson's willing to trade back.
He certainly has had no problems doing that in the past. You mentioned Kemdiche. That's one of my last questions to you. So, kind of a wild card in the draft. Falls for a lot of character concerns. Obviously super good. I remember even years back when it was kind of like those way too early mock drafts for either a year from now or 2 years from now, whatever it is. Robert Kemdiche was kind of like, oh, this guy could go number 1 overall.
Yep.
He's going to go like maybe 21 overall or something like that. Where does the slide stop for this obviously talented but also obviously troubled fellow?
So, yeah, fun fact I saw on the Twitter feed the other day, Kemdiche is actually only bringing 1 suit with him on his trip to Chicago, which means he's kind of banking on being selected the first day in round 1. And I do think somebody pulls the trigger in round 1. I'm not sure who that's going to be, but I don't think Kemdiche gets picked top 15. I don't think he gets picked top 20 either. Maybe 19, like we were talking about with the Bills. But that's as early as I see it, as 19 with Buffalo. Then we start thinking about Seattle and Carolina, maybe.
Oh, if they got
Green Bay.
him, that just wouldn't even be fair. One of those strong defenses gets stronger.
Absolutely. Or Denver, even at 31 too. So, it'll be interesting. But I think Kemdiche goes somewhere in the 20s. Is my guess.
20s.
Yes.
That's probably about where I would.
He's just too talented to go in the second round. I'm sorry. He's just far too talented. He's a dominant interior defensive lineman. Really, without the off the field concerns, he'd be a top 10 talent for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that he still is a top 10 talent, just maybe perhaps not gonna actually get picked there because of the character concerns. Kids, keep your nose clean.
Noah Spence is in the same situation. Obviously, we talk about Noah Spence dominated the Senior Bowl, really. I mean, every tackle he went up against, he generally dominated. Unfortunately, had to leave Ohio State and move to Eastern Kentucky, where he gave him a chance, and he performed pretty well. Spence is a top 20 talent, in my opinion, too. I think he can play 3-4 outside linebacker and play really well. And the question is, we don't know where he's going to go either because of his off-the-field concerns. So Kemdiche and him are both in same scenarios. I think Spence might even make it out of the first round. So
that really would be something. But I've heard some stuff about him perhaps falling and perhaps free-falling even to day 2 of the draft. So I think that's the questions I've got for you. Hopefully this has been an informative jaunt for our listeners down memory lane. Not really memory lane. It hasn't happened yet. But anticipating what memories we will be having in the future here from the 2016 NFL Draft. Any last words, Justin?
I just wanted to let you guys know the draft is tomorrow at 8 Eastern. And you really should check it out because it's really important. It's really awesome to see the new fresh faces of this league get their chances at making a name for themselves. And it's a great venue to watch. It's really fun to watch. You and I are going to watch together tomorrow.
It's going to be a blast.
And honestly, if you're a fan of a team, you should be into the draft for your team. You should be excited. You should be looking at prospects. You should be interested in making mock drafts for your teams. You should get involved. The draft is important. Obviously, especially for the Packers, they're all about a draft and develop team.
That is Ted Thompson's game.
The draft is something you really should get involved in, and it's a blast. It's really fun to cover. These last few months, really, for me. You tell me I got into this too early, but me getting into it early helped me feel more prepared this year, and it was real blast for me to cover everything that I did and watching film and checking out tweets all the time, just seeing what the updated things are. So really excited for tomorrow night, and we thank you for joining with us on this podcast. Elijah Freeman and Justin Dade signing off. Happy NFL Draft.